Hey, what's going on? Full Grace here. First, let's go Tigers. Yeah, they're kicking butt. And I got on my Jordan shirt. I don't know if you can see it, but he's the GOAT, so no debate there. But anyways, today I wanted to make a video. It was more into the childhood, inner child work and the developmental years from 0 to 5 years old. And I used to write out scripts and read them, but I feel like the videos are better when I freestyle. But then sometimes I forget some things that I wanted to talk about. So I'm gonna try a mix this time. I've got some things written down, but I'm just gonna freestyle about them. Like back in the day when I used to rap. If you don't know, now you know. So I don't know, like 7 years ago or more is when I started writing the book. And I was talking with my mom about how I didn't like naturally have childhood memories come up. That all my memories seem to be like from Iraq and beyond. That would like not like a flashback, but like just something reminds you of something. I could intentionally think of childhood memories, but um, they weren't like random thoughts. And so I thought that maybe the that Iraq was so impactful that I was like stuck in that era, and so I didn't really have a lot of belief in the childhood micro trauma and how important they were, especially after being through something like combat. And I think I've said this before in videos that one of the first times that I actually went to counseling, they started asking me questions about my childhood, and I like freaked out on the counselor. Like, what are you talking about, dude? Like, I just got back from Iraq doing like one of the worst jobs you can do, and I don't. Childhood wasn't the problem, and a little bit meaner than that, but that was the point of it. And so I did a lot of work on my combat trauma, and it even took a little bit for me to admit to having that with my ego and stuff, but I was still experiencing blocks even though I had worked through a lot of combat stuff. So I don't know, maybe like 4 or 5 years ago, I started to realize how impactful like the developmental years are, um, and I started to do inner child work. But I just started to scratch the surface on it, and then it was like the pandemic hit. I got married. We ended up moving to Costa Rica, selling our house in Michigan and moving to Costa Rica. And then while we were in Costa Rica, our relationship fell apart and we got divorced. And in the beginning of 2025. So during that time, I wasn't really successfully keeping up with my routine, and I didn't have a purpose. My life, this was some of the issues that I was having that was causing problems is that I was in a deep depression, and my wife and I were arguing almost every day, and so it wasn't healthy, and I didn't feel confident in finishing the book and publishing it, and I wasn't really doing those things that I had written about. So after the divorce, though, I started reading through the book again, and I started using some of the concepts and tools that I talked about in the book. And in doing that, I actually started to notice a difference in my quality of life. And so that's when I finished writing the book and published it. And one of the concepts that I wrote about in the book was inner child work, because like I said, I just started scratching the surface with it when I started writing the book. So it's not really in depth in the book, but it does talk about it. And it details the importance of exploring your subconscious to reconcile and reprocess events that created like negative self-image, negative self-hatred, negative self-talk, um, thought patterns, self-sabotaging, negative self-esteem. And so in doing the inner child work, I'm having a lot more like natural child memories. Remember I said, yeah, so I said I was like, didn't have those naturally, but I'm having more of them now. And I want to say, though, even though I don't talk about them on here, there are a lot of really good memories too. So I'm not just having like memories of these traumas that I'm talking about. That's part of it, but I'm having a lot more memories, like good ones, where I remember being a kid and laughing with my mom, or being with my dad, or with my stepdad, and we have a really good relationship now. But the parts that I share, because I'm talking about mental health, aren't necessarily those stories. So be cognizant of that, I guess. And it's none of this is like blaming. It's mostly the things that happen were situational and they're not like malicious. So we have a really good relationship now, and we talk about this stuff even though it can be uncomfortable. I was laughing with my mom and grandma today about awareness. We were talking about like how awareness is half the battle, that thing, like just because you're aware it doesn't fix it. It actually can, that's why I paired awareness and acceptance together in the book, because it can actually be overwhelming with, now that I'm aware, I know that this is, what I'm doing, and it makes me feel guilt and shame for doing it, even though I know what it is. So it's this kind of like dual thing. Yeah, it's nice to be aware, but you also have to work through it and you have to give yourself grace and acceptance during the time period between when you know and when you can fix it. And that's usually a lot longer than you expect it to be. So, um, yeah, we were just like, yeah, awareness is nice, but then it sucks because you know that you're screwing up. And I wish that I could be ignorant again. And we also talked about some of our childhood during the developmental phases from 0 to 5. And I talked about some of it on a different video, but more things came up that had an effect on me that, again, we talked about they were situational, they weren't malicious. They still had an impact on me, especially because of the low levels of cognitive development at those ages. So as children, you're really self-centered and you have a lot of like ego, and the world revolves around you. It's a very small world. Like, the people in your class, your family, and that's about all the exposure you get, and all of that is centered on you. As you get older, you start to realize that, yeah, it's still a small world, but it's a bigger world, and you're not that important in the cognizance, or in the grand scheme of things. Sorry, in the grand scheme of things. So, yeah, where are we at? But also, in having those kind of the cognitive development being at those ages and being so self-centered, is you develop these subconscious beliefs, and a lot of like how you perceive the world is formed during the years of 0 to 5. And so it's skewed, that the ideas and stuff are skewed, but they lie in the subconscious. And then there's the fact that like 90 to 95% of the decisions and choices you make throughout your day or throughout your life are subconscious. They're made subconsciously. So if you have these underlying feelings from a subconscious 4-year-old or 2-year-old, they might not be rational, and your rational brain today might be able to explain it and say, well, that's, because my dad was on drugs and had his own issues, is why my parents got divorced. But as a kid, you might have thought that had something to do with you. And even though you don't think that now, it's subconsciously imprinted from that age, and you act and you make decisions based on that feeling. So it's really important to kind of go through those things and realize how impactful they were, even though they might not seem like they were that impactful now that you think about it. So some of those things for me were when I was really young, and my mom had colon surgery. She like had a skiing accident, and then after that she had like a cyst removed. At 6 weeks old, I had surgery because I had pyloric stenosis on my stomach. And then at like 6 years old, I broke my elbow in the growth plate. That's why my arm doesn't straighten on the left side. And then my mom had I think she had, yeah, the colon, the cyst removed. And then I think I had my finger removed when I was 8. And then after that, my mom had a hysterectomy and then back surgery, or the other way around, back surgery and then a hysterectomy. And so during those times, my number one caretaker, my dad's really inconsistent. And in the beginning, in some of those surgeries, my stepdad wasn't even in my life yet. So my only caretaker could die. She's not available. It requires me to step up, and so even though it's kind of her trauma and her medical trauma, as a residual, I also have some trauma from it. It's kind of like when I went to Iraq, she still experienced her own trauma because of what I was going through. And especially the younger you are, the more significant it is. So when 0 to 4, when she's arguing with my dad and she doesn't feel safe, and he doesn't, he's spending money and doesn't have money for diapers, and he's just not showing up all night out partying, all of that is also rubbing off on me of how her nervous system is. And then from 0 to 5, I talked to my mom, and we moved a lot. I think from 0 to 5, I might have moved 10 to 15 times. And it wasn't until I was 8 years old that we finally stayed in a place for like 7 or 8 years. And then we moved to another place, Oxford, that we stayed for another 7 or 8 years. And then I was in Waterford for 15 years. That was the longest that I've lived in one house, was when I lived in Waterford. So there was a lot of instability. My dad was inconsistent or absent, inconsistent at best, and absent a lot of the times. Um, my stepdad didn't know how to really express emotions and didn't know much about that stuff, and he was kind of explosive with anger and discipline. So there was, a lot of instability, insecurity. My mom through surgeries, moving a lot, and that plays out in like a deep seated insecurity that I talked about in the last video, like this central um, insecurity of who I am deep down as a person. Um, then there's abandonment triggers. I remember this story, I talked about it earlier with my mom, and at the time I didn't understand what it was, but it was a trauma reaction, like a trigger. My sister and I were with my mom and my stepdad, and we used to go for walks out in the woods back behind our place in Lake Orion. And we were out walking, and I think we were being little shits or smartasses or something. And they decided to play a prank on us. So they said something like, oh, these kids are little shits. Let's just go start a new life by ourselves. And then they ran down the trail and they took off. They ran, I don't know how far up, but just a ways up the trail and popped off into the woods. And then we're, going to watch how we reacted and then hop out and laugh. Well, I freaked out. And my sister, who was a year and a half younger than me, she didn't have as much time with my dad before the divorce. I don't know, how it impacts people differently too, but I lost my shit like it was over, like that was a possibility that they really were going to abandon us. Jackie was a little more rational. I think I was 10, she might have been 8. And she was like, it'll be okay. We'll just go home. I'm sure they'll be there. They'll come back. They're not going to leave us. Blah, 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 blah. But, it wasn't that serious, but I was taking it as life was over. What are we going to do? And then they hopped out and laughed, and I was the tough guy football player, and they're like, "Oh man, you sure like melted like a little kid." Well, that's what shows up as that hurt little, scared little boy, and it takes over in those types of moments when you're triggered, and it can be very irrational, and it can feel like life or death situations when it's really not that big of a deal. So that was one of the things that how it played out. It plays out with self-sabotage. I would always find a way to get a D plus. The rule was you get C's or better or you get in trouble. Every single report card, especially if it was right before summer break, I was always grounded for the first 2 weeks of summer. So that was two things. That was me self-sabotaging and not knowing why. Um, I'm smart enough to not to get all good grades, but I just don't. Why? I don't turn in homework sometimes, and I just find a way not, just to get just under 69%. I need a 70% to not get in trouble, but I'm going to get a 69%. And that happened for a long time, and it was responded to with carrot and stick because they didn't understand. My parents didn't really understand. Nobody did really that much trauma and stuff like that. That I was, capable but not doing it. That might mean that I'm self-sabotaging. I'm not just being a bad kid. You're not going to punish it out of me. It's not going to work. That's just going to make me feel like I'm only loved if I perform. And so that, starts to make me feel in that way. And then not enjoying success because at my core, I'm bad. So you get imposter syndrome, and there's been times where I'm getting accolades at work and I'm the boss, and, but if you only knew who I really am, I wouldn't get this award or something. It's just this weird thing. Like, yeah, I wrote this book and it's got a lot of good information in it, but I don't feel like I'm capable of talking to people and helping people because I'm shitty. And it's just this really skewed belief. I'm not. But I had this belief that I was, and it's because of some of these things. Needing external validation, like the class clown, and almost like an addiction to it, to not being able to stop myself. Once I get the class rolling and I'm getting that validation, like I'm taking it too far. I'm gonna take it all the way because I'm just getting the validation. It's like, yes, it's like a drug hit. And so when I got the whole class rolling, there's no chance that I'm just gonna be like, all right, that's enough. Get back to teaching. Like I'm taking over your class and I'm getting all this validation. And so like that's temporary and you're constantly looking for new validation and that's when you're constantly chasing the next promotion, the next job title, the next financial bracket or whatever it is. It's temporarily make you happy, but it's deep down you're not happy with who you are as at the core. Um, that's another thing is finding ways to be upset when things are going good and how to beat yourself up when things are going poorly, like having a really bad inner critic. I talk about this with my stomach issues. Like if I'm having too many good days in a row, then I don't deserve the disability that I get, and I'm a fraud. Or if I have too many bad days in a row, then I'm a fraud in the mental health area because my mental health goes to shit and I have depression and I still have suicidal ideation sometimes and you know, I still have days where I get pissed off and yell at God and get mad and say I hate my life, even though I don't. And I do positive affirmations all the time, but I still have moments. And so when it's going like that, I beat myself up on both sides. So I never enjoy, I need to never give myself grace. It also can play out, this stuff can play out in like risk taking behavior. I used to go down to a really bad area in Detroit and buy weed, and then bring it back and sell it in the suburbs. Stupid, carrying a gun and having, you know, things almost go sideways, but never really go completely sideways. But I felt invincible after Iraq and like that I had been trained and in such a situation that I could handle myself. It's dumb, but that's how it played out. Addiction, numbing from bad feelings because when I'm numbed out, I can focus on work or focus on the task at hand and not have these interruptions or these disturbing feelings um, that I used to try to numb and get away from. Where I was talking about now, I try to feel them and understand them and um, sit with them. It plays out in having poor boundaries, like an anxious or an avoidant attachment style. You can look those up. That's part of the inner child work. Um, you can develop the anxious or avoidant attachment styles or mixed. Um, the good one is a secure attachment style. And that's how you can try to get to working through some of this stuff. But having poor boundaries and allowing behavior because like I used to be, or I am sick, so I used to feel like, well, if this woman likes me, then I gotta accept the fact that at least she accepts me even though I'm messed up. And so I'm not really picking the woman that I love, but just accepting any woman who's willing to show love to me. That's kind of a poor boundary, or poor boundaries with my dad and family members and stuff. So that's how it played out in ways that I found that these like childhood micro trauma type things play out in adulthood. And so how do you like fix that stuff? The inner child meditations is like going back and reparenting yourself and using like the inner child meditations. You can write letters to the people who hurt you or to the people who were your caretakers at those times, and then you can destroy the letter. You don't ever give it to them or read it to them. You just write it out, read it, and then destroy it. You can journal about your life in like different epochs or whatever different time spans of your life, like around important events. So for me, from 0 to 7 is one set of age group that I look at, and then that was like with my mom and dad when they were married and divorced, but before my stepdad. And then 8 to 20 is like with my stepdad before Iraq. And then 21 to 27 is Iraq and with my first wife. And then 28 to 35 is being single in Waterford and working for the government and going back to school. And then 35 to 41 is being married to Rachel, moving to Costa Rica, and all that stuff. So it's going to take you You know, it might take you more than one session to finish just 0 to 7. It might take you 3 sessions to finish that. So work through it in little chunks like that, and write out, you know, from 0 to whatever. You don't have cognizant memories, but you can imagine what your life was like based on what you've heard and stories and things like that. Like, I don't remember having surgery at 6 weeks old, but I know I had surgery at 6 weeks old. I don't remember being in Houston, Texas, but I know my parents were in Houston, Texas, and I know that my mom left when I was 6 months old, and you know, I know that we lived in a bunch of different places. If your parents are open to talking about that stuff, maybe ask them about those years if you don't know. And but yeah, that's something that's really helped me to uh, work through some of this stuff. And it's crazy because I didn't ever give any of this stuff any type of validation that it was even important. I I thought it was in the past. I don't think about it. How can it affect me? Well, it does. It bubbles up in these weird ways that we talked about, and you know, it can come out in seemingly unrelated ways. Like, it seemed like I was reacting to my parents running up the trail at that moment. It didn't seem like it was because of my past. It seemed like that moment made me really go over the top with my emotions, but it wasn't that moment. It was the underlying thing. And so that's what I've started to realize is that, and even though some of these things, like I said, they weren't malicious, it was just a skewed mindset of my ego at the time. Like, even being not having a lot of money when we were younger, and me wanting like name brand things, or me wanting certain things, and I get the response, you can't always get what you want. And you know, it is what it is, but like, you might as a young kid feel like you're not worthy of good things because we're poor. You know what I mean? Or like, we don't have money, so we can't waste our money on nice things, or I'm not loved enough to have nice things. Whatever the belief might be around that. And it's not anything malicious. We didn't have money to buy those things, and to waste on that. My mom's a single mom without help from dad, on a bus driver salary, taking care of 2 kids, and not getting help from the government. Like, that's crazy what she did, and how she did it. But that stuff still affects me. And even though, like, moving, we were always upgrading and going to a better place after the divorce. And during the divorce, it was just a lot of moving, or before the divorce, it was a lot of moving. But after the divorce, every time we're moving into a better situation, but it's still affecting me. You know what I mean? So I don't know. A lot of this stuff is new to me. Like I said, I'm just starting to go through it, but in doing so, it's really unlocking a lot of core confidence, authenticity. Talked to my mom too about you know, with my stepdad, I had to be a different person around him because my personality, with being sarcastic and things like that, just it did not get good responses. So you're walking on eggshells, being a different person. Because if I'm my real self, then you know, there's something wrong with my real self, is what it comes down to. There becomes a belief that there's something wrong with me. And so, I don't know. There's a lot of these things that play out and they don't seem that impactful, but because of the age that you were, and the place that you were in your cognitive development cycle, they imprint in your subconscious, they can be very, very um, detrimental in your adult life, even though it feels like that would be stupid. You mean because I couldn't get the name brand stuff, that I might have developed a belief that I am poor, and that's why I can never get a good job or make enough money, is because I self-sabotage, or because I have this restricting belief that I'm a poor person. You don't have to be. You know what I mean? You have to actually believe something's possible in your subconscious to be able to achieve it. Even though you consciously believe I want success, you may subconsciously believe I can't have success. I'm I come from a poor family. We're poor. That's just what we are. Um, you don't know how to handle money. It's a learned skill. You have to, you know, go learn it. And you might be at a disadvantage. It's like, just because your parents are an alcoholic doesn't mean you're going to be an alcoholic, but you're going to have a harder time not being one. And just because your parents were poor and didn't manage money well doesn't mean that you're destined to that. You can figure out new ways of doing it. Um, but it takes a lot of awareness and a lot of working through these limiting beliefs that you develop at this young age. So again, I hope that this resonates with you. Leave a comment, like, subscribe, all that fun stuff. Go Tigers, let's go. Michael Jordan, the true GOAT, no dispute. Who LeBron who? Um, no, he's good. Longevity wise, he's the man. But as far as the greatest of all time is MJ. I don't know how I got on that. But oh, I'm wearing the shirt. But anyways, love you guys, and let's heal. Healing is it's generational. The trauma that we experience, sometimes our parents do act certain ways because of their trauma, and so by working through this stuff, you're breaking that. And so you're not gonna, let's do that. Let's generationally break some of these trauma trends that have been passed down from generation to generation. Let's do the work. So it's not fun, it's not easy, but it's worth it. The outcome that you receive, it's like, sometimes going to the gym's not very fun, but afterwards when you're able to, go to on the beach and look good, you feel good. So most of the time, in order to get the desired outcome that you want, you have to do some things that you don't want. And this is really life changing. So let's go.